Hey, it's Paul. Welcome back to YNR Update. Okay, we're going to jump into today's episode. It's a busy one, so I'm not going to waste any time. I want to call this episode Town of Hypocrites, and I'll explain why in a little while. But it's sort of comical, the amount of hypocrites we got in Genoa City. First thing we see is Victor, and he asks Nick if he knows anything about Gabe. Now, nobody in this town is subtle because Gabe is standing 10 feet away and he can hear everything. So after he approaches, Victor just gives him the whole, I like vetting everybody that, that I have coming working for me. Why doesn't he just, hire someone to do that? But at any rate, it doesn't really get him too far, and eventually, Gabe asks why he's prying into his business. They get into it. He tells him he's not afraid of Victor. Victor tells him to check his ego. The same thing that Adam used to do with him, and the same thing we've seen him do with Gabe in recent past. So, after Victor leaves, we see Gabe confronts Nick about dumping Sage. And then Nick calls him out for sleeping with Chelsea. So like I said, we got a lot of hypocrites going on here. And while Gabe's doing this, we all know that he hopped in bed with Sage. So I'm calling double hypocrisy on this one. So, it's kind of hilarious the way this goes. But, Gabe just says Billy had one foot out the door anyways. So... what's going on, I know what's going on, so it makes it even more comical. In the end, Nick calls him selfish, and they're all selfish, aren't they? But that's the end of that. After that, we see Abby and Stitch talking, and they're talking about, now she feels that she's a target again because there's proof, or it looks like there's proof that Sharon didn't do it. So what do? They start getting close, and just as they're about to make out some more, who comes around but Ashley, and she is not loving it again. And in fact, she's kind of had it with these guys, and she really says to Stitch, if you don't like the way it is around here or the rules that have gone down, maybe you should be working somewhere else. So Stitch, takes this as a threat to his job and says, no, I don't want to do any of that. And then Abby, the poor thing, how long have her and Stitch been together? Honestly, 2 episodes? 3 episodes? She jumps up and tells her mom that this is it. This is the relationship. It's a thing she's been looking for. She's so sure after a couple of days. And, she's really, really into this relationship. And what does Stitch do? He's staring at the ceiling. It's like in those movies, those high school movies where the guy gets caught by his friends and he's kind of hanging out with the girl that's been with everybody, and he kind of denies it or looks sheepish. Well, this guy couldn't look more sheepish. He wanted to get out of the room. Abby looks over and sees that look on his face, and she gets out of there. So eventually we see the old Scooby-Doo gang, and they're hanging out, and they, because of Kevin, discovered that the deli was actually closed at 6 o'clock, and in the photo with Sharon, the timestamp photo, it shows 9 o'clock. So they know that the photo was altered. Wow, there's no forensic people in this town. Paul's willing to dismiss this without even going, to any great lengths. So, but I'll talk about that later. Then we see Dylan. He goes in and he actually calls Paul on, and he says, he starts trying to explain to him that, you're overlooking this evidence. There's evidence that can prove Sharon's innocent, and Paul sticking at the same hard line. And he also kind of makes it personal for Dylan, and he says, does Avery know that you're doing all this for Sharon? He's trying to, it's his son, yes, although recently, and he's trying to sort of save him the heartache he thinks he's going to go through because he sees what happens to anyone that gets close to Sharon. And he also thinks she's guilty. So they get nowhere with this. Eventually Dylan meets up with Kevin and Noah, and they want him to talk to Paul. They think he's the only one that can do it. And I thought Dylan would be all over this, but he actually at first hesitates and says that, he's doesn't want to push it because of his new relationship with Paul. But hasn't he been pushing it? Hasn't he been hiding evidence? What about the tire iron? So this should be nothing for him. So eventually they do get him to come around and see the light. After that, we see Anita, and it's kind of funny. She, always the gold digger. She stays right on character, and she tells Chelsea that she should be setting her sights high. Of course, a guy that had an inheritance and lost it all and barely has a job, Gabe, that's right. She should be going after Gabe. And so we know that's a little bit of manipulation, because ordinarily Anita would not send her near Gabe because she thinks he's got no money. But Chelsea's not hearing it. She tells her that sleeping with Gabe was the worst thing she ever did. But come on, between me, you, and a rock, we know that that's stirred up something in her, and she's gonna be find her way right back to him. These two are like magnets right now, and they're gonna find each other. So we're gonna wait to see what happens.